Good evening. My name is Dr. Paul Kay, and welcome to As the Spirit Moves You. We're very happy to be able to interview people whose spirit has moved them in their lives. And today we have a very special guest, Leigh Taylor-Young. As the Spirit Moves You is sponsored by the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, which teaches soul transcendence. And one of the things we like to do on this show from time to time is to interview what we call the elders of MSIA, of the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness.
I have to think about that.
These are people who have been studying the teachings and specifically have been working with John Roger for many, many years, since the beginnings of the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness. And of course, the word elder is probably a great misnomer given my guest here today, this great sight of beauty before my eyes, Leigh Taylor-Young. Welcome to As the Spirit Moves You, Leigh.
Thank you, Paul.
We're very happy to have you with us. You've led such a rich and exciting life, and to such an extent that we wanted to record some of the highlights, particularly as the Spirit moved you forward in your life. When I looked at your website, and for the listeners, that is www.lty.com, you had divided your life, in a sense, into decades. There was the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. I want to take a little bit of a different approach and just get straight into the heart of the matter in your life and the changes. You went to India.
Yes.
And what year was that? Do you recall?
I went to India about 2 days after I completed shooting a film called Soylent Green. That was the fall of 1972.
Now, what led you to go to India?
I have a very dear friend who is still with us. She's 96 now, named Sonora Wong Hao. And she one day said to me, would I come over and do the Ouija board with her? And I said, I'd be delighted. I just finished shooting on Soylent Green, so I went over to her house. She pulled out a Ouija board, and basically, this was my first introduction to such a thing, and it moved all over and told me to go to India. And I thought I was a very spontaneous person. So about a week later, I went, and it mentioned different places, and I just took a backpack and spoke to a very dear actor who I had been in my very first film with Peter Sellers, who knew I was going, and he was working with an Indian guru at the time, and suggested that I meet with several of his friends in Mauritius and in India. That's all I took with me, and I just took off on the plane and went, and with no real destination. But I ended up in Rishikesh.
What did you take with you again?
A backpack.
Just a backpack, okay.
Mm-hmm. And don't do that anymore. Should, perhaps, but...
Now it's like very big cases, several cases.
I'm trying to go back to the original way. It was great. It was a great adventure, and I went to Mauritius first in the Indian Ocean, stopped there, and got a cab and gave them the name of this guru. That's how I was doing it. And he said, oh, yes, and took me to a little place by the ocean to a man named Swami Venkatesananda, who was Peter Sellers' teacher at the time. And there was a great guru in India by the name of Shivananda, who was greatly regarded, who had been Venkatesananda's teacher. So I was with him for 2 weeks, and he then suggested I go off to the Shivananda ashram in the Himalayas, the high Himalayas in Rishikesh. So I took a flight to New Delhi, got there, and in all of New Delhi, there was absolutely no place to stay. And it was just me. I had no travel agents. I was just going from place to place in a country I'd never been in, and ended up sleeping in a room behind a kitchen in a tiny little place. And a Sikh man, I told him, he said, why are you here? I said, well, I want to go up to Rishikesh. And really, when I look back at many of the things that I did, the Spirit was truly moving me. I mean, it was a great adventure. It was a great walk of faith. It was a great joy to be participating in the unexpected in a foreign country. And Sikhs there, one of the things that they abide by in their religion is part of it is to be a protector. So he was a very different experience than a lot of the other Indian men I was coming in contact with. It was a white woman alone. It was not You know, even though it was the early 70s, it was still an oddity. And he took me sort of under his wing, and he had a sort of bedraggled taxi, and to put me in the back, and he said, I take you there. He didn't tell me it was 7 hours away, through the most roughest roads I'd ever seen, where every goose, every goat was in danger of their life because of the way they drove, you know. And about 2 in the morning, I arrived at the door of this ashram. I was very nervous now.
This was in the Himalayas?
Yes, in the Himalayas,
Rishikesh.
a place called Rishikesh, which is regarded as a holy place in India for spiritual study. Ashrams study to become a Swami. And it was about 2 in the morning, and it was right at the foot of the Ganges. The moon was full, and a little bell was outside this door, and he left me. He said, oh, very good, you good now? And he leaves, there's no lights, there's no nothing, and I rang the bell, and there was a Swami there. And I was only one of 2 Western individuals. The other was a Western woman. And he put me in a cell with her. And all there was a wooden board on the floor, no light, and a cement floor, and this other person. And it was an ashram for 200 Swamis in study. And that was the beginning of that adventure. So sorry for being so long-winded.
Not at all, no. We want you to be long-winded. You arrived unannounced.
Unannounced, yes.
So you weren't knowing what to expect, and they weren't expecting you.
They weren't expecting me, and no. Mm-mm.
One of the themes I want to weave in and out is the idea of outrageousness, what it is to be outrageous. And to me, you know, looking back at that particular time, would you say that that was pretty outrageous for you to just go to India without anything?
Yes,
okay.
I would. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
And so here you are at this ashram, you're on the floor, sleeping. What next?
Well, essentially, when one goes to India, this is my experience, so I'll say my experience. You know, I was somewhat prepared because, in a sense, I could say that India was the second culture that I grew up with, because I spent an enormous amount of time being partially raised by my grandfather, who ended up becoming one of the heads of the Ford Foundation in India. And he was an extraordinary mentor in my life. And I could wax on and eloquent about him. He was a farmer originally from Iowa, founded the field of rural sociology. So being generically a farmer and a man of great understanding of nature and the holism of nature, spending as much time as I did with him, he would take me for walks and teach me about nature, the stars, how animal life worked. And at the same time, he would go off to India and bring back, at a very young age, the books that interested him. One of the books that interested him greatly was Autobiography of a Yogi, which he gave me when I was about 12. And
this was the autobiography of
Yogananda.
Paramahansa Yogananda.
Paramahansa Yogananda. And it's heady reading for any adult, but one of the things my grandfather did for me is that he taught me in a Socratic way. And in the ways in which he taught me, he assumed, in the way in which he spoke with me, that I could encompass material. So he didn't set up a kind of sense of limitation. He set up an inordinate sense of excitement that we were sharing learning together. I loved him very much, and he knew he sensed that I was a very curious girl and that I was very hungry for other things. He himself was a minister. And so along with his sense of nature and the spirit in nature, he also had a strong sense of spirit otherwise. And now there was India being introduced, both musically, artistically, spiritually, and he would have me read from the book, and then we would meet at 11 o'clock at night in the living room and speak till 3 or 4 in the morning and break all the rules, and go to bed late, but this would happen often. So in many ways, he set me up for this awakening to India. But what I was going to say is nothing quite prepares you for going to India. It is a sense shock on one level. It depends on what your mindset is, on what your preparation is. But when I arrived and awoke in the ashram the next morning to where I would be seeing everything that I'd arrived to in the dark, nothing could have prepared that. Even reading Yogananda of the ashrams in India, it was monkeys were in every trees, and the Ganges was in my vista, and all, of course, the plethora of gods in varying pictures and idols, if you will. And it began a month-long stay in which I followed the rhythm of the ashram, which was getting up at 3:30 and so forth.